William Blake was a painter and sketcher throughout most of his life. His passion in his young days was largely drawing. His only formal education was in the arts at the Royal Academy of Arts. It was only in his free time that he wrote poetry until an unusual event sparked his interest for a large remainder of his life. Blake was born on November 28, 1757 in London Broad Street, Carnaby Market. James Blake, the father of William Blake, was an Irish, fairly prosperous hosier with the now-known English mother Catherine Armitage, supposedly. The marriage document you see on the screen now is correct. Her surname is written as Armitage, but it is Armitage. For those that are interested in this detail, you should be able to find it in the description in the further reading section. William Blake's stature is quite famous among many who knew him. Gilbert Chesterton, a biographer who wrote about many famous individuals such as Charles Dickens, describes Blake as slight and small, but with a big and very broad head, and with shoulders more broad than were natural to his stature, which gives the impression of a certain squareness in the mere plan of his face and figure. He has something in common, so to speak, with the typically square men of the 18th century, like Danton without the height, like Napoleon without the mask of Roman beauty, or like Mirabeau without the dissipation and the disease. He had abnormally big, dark eyes. If he suddenly entered the room, and he was likely to have entered it suddenly, I think we should have felt first a broad Bonaparte head and broad Bonaparte shoulders, and then afterwards realized that the figure under them was frail and slight. His character is analogous to his structure. He was willing to speak his mind suddenly. He cared not for social norms, and he was unwilling to yield. Queer but solid. A solid maniac or a solid liar, but not possibly a wavering hysteric or a weak dabbler in doubtful things. This blunt personality of his might explain how, despite being commissioned for illustrations of commercial books, he tends to critique the book within the artwork. For example, many modern interpretations of William Blake's illustration of Mary Wollstonecraft indicate a titular mentor character as being too overbearing and rigid with her morality. Because Blake lived during the Napoleonic era, it is not that unusual to see French troops march along the English Channel. In response, the British amassed a troop of dragoons to Sussex coast, with some in a British pub. Blake, 46 at the time, found one of the drunken dragoons in his garden one August 1803 morning. The dragoon refused to leave, causing Blake to move him out forcefully. This soldier later accused Blake of blaspheming the king. Thus, Blake was on trial for sedition and assault. After a long battle, Blake was, according to the Sussex Weekly Advertiser, found by the jury acquitted. This event was the inspiration for Blake to begin writing poetry with more seriousness than he did before. The accusers and judges were later incorporated into his epic Milton, a poem in 2 books, which contain his most famous hymn, Jerusalem. William Blake's style in writing is almost immediately recognizable to many individuals. In his most natural years, his youthful poetry, such as the Songs of Innocence, he tends to have sing-songy lyrical poetry, many of which were quatrains, a poem whose stanzas are subdivided every 4 lines. According to Chesterton, the lyrical qualities of his poem tend to arise from singing them aloud.
The little black boy. My mother bore me in the southern wild, and I am black, but oh, my soul is white. White as an angel is the English child, but I am black, as if bereaved of light.
This is Blake's most controversial poem, along with The Chimney Sweeper. However, this poem still demonstrates some of William's lyrical style. First is the obvious arrangement of the quatrain. Next is another characteristic common to him, the ABAB form. Finally, there are the references to biblical imagery. If we were to analyze simply the first stanza, we would find out so much about the attitudes of the author. First is his stance against racism and slavery. Following the point of view of a child born in the southern wild, that is Africa, we see his thoughts. Oh, my soul is white, but I am black as if bereaved of light. He already sees himself as unequal. This positive connotation of the angel imagery used in a negative light is ironic. Blake already makes the reader uncomfortable by the boy comparing himself to an angel. His skin is black as if bereaved of light. The first stanza, in some other context, may make Blake appear racist. However, reading the poem in context should make it clear his stance.
And we are put on earth a little space, that we may learn to bear the beams of love. And these black bodies and this sunburnt face are but a cloud, and like a shady grove. For when our souls have learned the heat to bear, the cloud will vanish. We shall hear his voice, saying, Come out from the grove, my love and care, and round my golden tent like lambs rejoice.
Skipping ahead to the mother's lesson, we see her thoughts. Notice how the poem maintains the ABAB form. Despite the 4th stanza having a slant rhyme between love and grove, it may have simply been because English during this time was developing. Here, love may have been pronounced lobe, or grove pronounced grove. The poem also characterizes the mother as caring and hopeful through her sermon. Despite this, there is still a sense of morbidity. If one reads the subtext carefully, she is wishing for death. The mother mentions our lives as put on earth a little space. These black bodies and this sunburned face are but a cloud, and when our souls have learned the heat to bear. These two stanzas use negative connotations. The mother, despite having a belief in release, feels pain in life. Sunburned faces, earth a little space, and heat to bear. Finally, as before in the previous stanzas, the biblical allusions are set up. Unlike before, the biblical references, including the use of lambs, are simply in reference to her sermon, as opposed to being ironic. Stanzas 4 and 5 set up the theme of the entire poem through the response the boy has after the sermon.
Thus did my mother say, and kissed me. And thus I say to little English boy, when I from black, and he from white cloud free, and round the tent of God like lambs we joy, I'll shade him from the heat, till he can bear to lean in joy upon our Father's knee. And then I'll stand and stroke his silver hair, and be like him, and he will then love me.
Through slavery and the lessons from his mother, the boy thinks himself subservient. The quatrain lyrical lines of the poem imply innocence. The boy is speaking to us. Next is an uncomfortable highlight thanks to the structure of the rhyming form, ABAB. On the sixth stanza, the rhyme between me and free specifically showcases the phrase, he from white cloud free. In conjunction with when I from black, this imagery already declares that the little black boy is not free. And despite being innocent, he knows. This technique of rhymes highlighting important information is a fundamental aspect of the rhyme scheme. Blake provides us with insight onto his radical stance of slavery at the time. Despite being a part of the Songs of Innocence, the little black boy provides us with great insight into controversial issues by illustrating racial struggles through rhyme schemes, allusions, and negative connotations. No matter the voice used, one will notice the controversial nature of this poem, and that is why this piece, while controversial, is famous. One of Blake's most iconic poems is A Poison Tree from the Songs of Experience. This dark fable may have served as an inspiration or perhaps even basis of the legendary short story A Rose for Emily. The poem is written at the very beginning of her story. Take note of the quatrain and lyrical nature of this poem. I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe. I told it not my wrath did grow. The first line establishes a dark tone by using two words, angry and wrath. Similar to the previous poem, Blake also uses contrasting words through the rhyme scheme AABB. A contrasts with B. For example, friend contrasts with foe, and end contrasts with grow. Using all of these techniques, William Blake establishes a dark tone immediately. And I watered it in fears night and morning with my tears, and I scented it with smiles and with soft deceitful wiles. Like the little black boy, the rhyme scheme remains the same throughout the entire poem. In this instance, maintaining the rhyme scheme. Notice how the underlined phrase is an instance of parallelism. Maintaining the rhyme scheme and using parallel structures makes the reader uncomfortable. It gives the impression that the poisonous tree growing project is intentional. And it grew both day and night, till it bore an apple bright, and my foe beheld it shine, and they knew that it was mine, and into my garden stole when the night had veiled the pole, in the morning glad I see my foe outstretched beneath the tree. One of the aspects that makes this poem so iconic is the imagery associated with it. The apple bright and the tree. The apple bright likely refers to the story of Adam and Eve, while the tree is a darker version of the wisdom tree found in the Garden of Eden. This inspires many interpretations. For example, Davood, Heidar, and Davoud, Zamzia, interpret the tree as a personification of internal hatred through nurtured wrath. The poisoned apple is a personification of their eventual demise. Blake adds one more idea to this poem, tree growing process. This process is outlined correctly, watering it, sunning it, and watching it to check for complications. For readers familiar with this process, it further adds to the intention of the protagonist. Blake's revolutionary poetry is nearly impossible to break down into common elements. However, Songs of Innocence and Experience, being a large work of importance and a great showcase of his natural talent for poetry, can be easy to somewhat pin down into a rubric of sorts. First is Blake's use of biblical allusions. Most of the time, the biblical allusions are imagery of gods or angels or anything related as such. Another is Blake's structuring of a quatrain. This structure may be used because Blake tended to sing his poems. This example is very evident in The Little Black Boy from the Songs of Innocence. The rhyme scheme of the poem tends to be simple, such as AABB or ABAB. These rhyme schemes rarely tend to involve other sounds within the same stanza and rarely repeat the same words. Finally, Blake's favorite rhetorical tool within the series of poems is the antithesis, in which a part of speech or a sentence is opposed to create a balance of ideas, such as in give me liberty or give me death. It should be no surprise that Blake's direct poetry of the feelings has had a large influence on many readers today. Blake would see his popularity in the 19th century, that is, if he were alive to see it. Blake died alone and largely ignored for a large portion of his career. Nevertheless, he had an impact on music, literature, and the 1960s counterculture movement. Jerusalem is a hymn that was originally a self-contained opening preface to the epic Milton, a poem in 2 books. The famous opening phrase, "And did those feet in ancient time walk upon England's mountain green," can be heard in this choir you hear now. Jerusalem became an unofficial English national anthem over time. Despite God Save the Queen being the official anthem, King George V said he preferred the song to God Save the King, and many football stadiums used this as their national anthem before rugby games. British Parliament even considered the decision in 2008 to make this the new national anthem. The version you hear now has been rewritten for choir as opposed to an orchestra of players as written originally by Gilbert. The Romantic era of literature is an era encompassed by the works of artists who were unafraid to express themselves outwardly in their works. If there should be a poster child for such an era, it would be William Blake. His character is one that is already well suited for it, a mind unafraid to speak outwardly, whose broad head brings imagination and beautiful analogies to life, and whose hands brought forth such beautifully engraved and written art and poetry. Although somewhat rude to others, his works brought the future to his past. Now this insight will be forever in our minds through the lyrical poetry of William Blake.